If you're worried at all about Ulduar, then look no further. In today's video, we're going to give you some quick tips of every single boss in the raid. Starting out with Flame Leviathan, you should know that all of the vehicles scale with your eye level. So if you're not being thrown on top of the boss himself, make sure you equip purely your highest eye level pieces. All of the damage comes from the demolishers, so keep your stacks of pyrite up on the boss and make sure if you're throwing up anyone on top of the boss to down him, that it is your range DPS. I highly suggest Boomkins and Affliction Locks. Those seem to be the most consistent at downing all 4 of the adds very quickly. Straight to Ignis, you should know that you're able to continue DPSing, healing, and doing anything else you need to do whenever you're put in the slag pot. That's pretty much his little kangaroo belly that actually gives you a haste buff, so keep pumping while you're in there and keep healing. You can also rotate Aura Mastery for your casters to never get interrupted by his AoE interrupt. On Razorscale, save all of your ICDs and cooldowns, all to use whenever the boss is brought down from the first air phase. If your guild can do this well enough, you can put out enough DPS to down the boss already before he actually enters into a second air phase. For XT, make sure that all of your melee are stacked on one side of the boss, so that whenever someone gets the light bomb, they can move to the boss's other foot and continue DPSing. It just helps you with the high HP of this boss. Also, if you are doing hard mode, try to drop all of the void zones in a very similar location so that you can reduce the amount you need to move during the fight. For Iron Counselor, there's a tight window when the boss drops 2 runes of power at the same time. You can actually stand in both of these and get double the damage boost. So if you're a class that has a snapshot, make sure you are snapshotting a big DPS ability whenever this happens, and just try to keep that up. If you're a DK, you could also try to make sure your gargoyles are summoned inside of the rune of power. That's because they actually get the damage buff from it, but they don't get a damage buff from you being inside of the rune of power. You can utilize cheeky dig rats to make sure your Gary is in here. Lastly, have your tanks stack the bosses very close to each other because the rune of power is summoned underneath one of the bosses, so that it's a lot higher likelihood of these actually overlapping, so you can get double of them. For Kologarn, just utilize cleave as well as you can. You can actually trap or AoE or even cleave from the main body in the middle and hit the 2 left and right arms. This is a simple fight, but it's also one where I would suggest not being unholy DK. Maybe go to Frost because your gargoyle will always be inside of his hitbox meleeing him. It's very frustrating. You can again utilize cheeky dig rats if you are playing well. And before I move on, I do want to say I'll have a video talking about what that actually means and the actual full new playstyle of Unholy DKs, like a whole new guide coming out in the next couple days. For Ayayaya, just make sure that you are not pulling the boss yourself, because the pull of the boss is the most scary part. A lot of people can die very quickly and it can all go to hell if you actually have your tank himself pull the boss. So just use a shaman totem and stand LOS. On Hodir, you can pre-debuff the frozen adds. Anything that causes damage to them will start the boss actually attacking you. On the PTR, there was a glitch where you could distract the boss, but that should be gone when we have the boss live. After breaking the adds out, try to run the boss to the corner of the room so that they will all group up a little bit closer, and then bring the boss back to the middle of the room. From there, it's all about having a pumper group established that has around 6 casters in it, standing in the beams so that you can spread the actual lightning buff that only spreads to 6 people. So if you get the Stormcloud buff, run it over to the pumper group that's already been established to make sure that they can do more DPS to the boss and help you get this hard mode down. For Thorim, treat him kind of like Kel'Thuzad, where you're stacking melee groups around the boss in very tight stacks so that they don't chain a chain lightning and kill everyone else. From there, it's mostly a tank and spank, but you can actually get more DPS or more utility out of any casters that are positioned right here. That's because the tunnel in the room is right here, so he does less of his lightning abilities in this section, meaning that sometimes you won't have to move at all. And everyone knows if you don't have to move, you're just doing more DPS. Continue casting and enjoy the pump. For Freya, damage to the adds is all that matters. The detonating lashers are going to be the scariest part for a lot of raid groups. Have your boomkins spec out of Typhoon so they can do a knockback, and have anyone that has an AoE stun just stun and slow the adds while you blow them all up. It's very useful to actually have a warlock switch into destruction spec so they can Shadow Fury AoE stun these adds. It just makes the fight very, very easy. When you get the 3 adds themselves, just make sure you're interrupting and have a DK tank kite the snap lasher with a slow and icy touch and taunt rotating so he keeps aggro. Kite it around and you'll be fine. Oh, and the mushrooms that are spawned during the Ancient Conservator actually last into the next phase for a little bit, so you can do 25% extra damage. Some classes can even snapshot those if you stand underneath these at the beginning of whatever next phase starts. To make the Mimiron fight easy, it's all about managing your own personal responsibilities. Sometimes that means you are the kiter for the fires, and if you are kiting the fires around, know that you can combine the heads of 2 snakes of the fires, and it makes it so all of those fires are grouped up in a much cleaner way. Also, if you want want to help out your raid, rogues, DKs, and hunters can actually use defensives to clear mines around Mimiron himself so that people don't accidentally run into them and die. For general Vezax, I would suggest all casters stand on the edge of these shadow vapors. That's because whenever a new one is sent towards your group, you might have to move only a few steps and move right back into it to avoid getting knocked back and taking the damage. This raid is all about optimizing your movement so you can continue DPSing, so it's very simple there. If you're doing the hard mode, the golden point for most casters DPS to stay at their mana is around 40%, so that you can actually down the Serenite Animus and then continue DPSing the boss. If you aren't doing hard mode, DKs do know you can grip the Serenite Vapors to give your healers a little bit of extra mana in positions they really like it. For Yogg-Saron, phase 1 ads are supposed to mind control, so watch out for that and make sure you're interrupting accordingly. Watch your pets and make sure you're controlling them so they're not being sent into any of the crushers whenever those are out. And do know that AoEing during the last phase can be a massive help for your raid. So if you have something like dropping traps or any channeled ability spells, whenever you need to turn around when he's doing lunatic gaze to make sure you don't lose your actual sanity is huge. It's actually fully helping out the raid. And if you have channeled spells like a warlock, you're continuing doing full DPS rotations because you're just channeling and turning around facing away from the boss. For Algalon, here's a big tip. Use lesser flasks of resistance. This flask will greatly reduce the amount of damage you take. Anyone with the ranged silence can interrupt the living constellations that are flying around. Warlocks using mouse over macros with their pets to continuously interrupt these while they're continuing DPSing the fight can be the difference between you actually killing this boss or losing out on a lockout. And there you have it, guys. Thanks for watching. This was some tips for every single boss in Ulduar. If you want to see more tips and tricks, or if you want to support the channel, of course, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any other tips that I might have forgotten or that didn't make the cut, please let me know in the comments, or just let everybody else know in the comments because it's extremely helpful. I'll see you guys all in Ulduar, and good luck out there.